You're now watching Sports Bettor's Paradise on the BetRivers Network.
All right, Jimmy Ott along with Paul Stone. It's the Sports Bettor's Paradise on the BetRivers Network, talking handicapping approaches for college basketball. And, you know, Paul, this has kind of been the season where it's a lot of top 10 teams have gone on the road and lost outright to unranked teams. We've talked about that a lot. It's always been a little bit of an approach. For football and basketball, as far as considering unranked teams that are favored over ranked teams. And, as we get further and further away from the importance of rankings and basically deciding national championships and things like that, they still do carry a little bit of a weight and a little public bait to them. So a lot of people have talked about every college basketball analyst, whether it's gambling or non-gambling, is talking about the top 10 teams being upset at a higher rate. So, and it's those home dogs have been a big angle as well, profitable angle. But you're looking at the rankings a little bit of a different twist here, and explain. Going to the AP Top 25, and you've got a sample size here for about 27 games. Talk about the angle that you're talking about this particular stretch of the season.
Yeah, Jimmy, I think, first of all, the inclination of most bettors is to bet the better teams. And certainly the Associated Press's top 25 teams would qualify as such. Again, many bettors, in my opinion, they are predisposed to betting these favorites because they're the superior team. These bettors are, again, more focused on the side than the number. But in reality, I think most bettors would be better off if they did a reset and shifted their focus to the number rather than the participating teams. The number and the situation, I should probably say. Just like every person has their price, I think every team has its number. So I think we need to shift that thought away from the better teams. I think we've talked about this on this podcast, but handicapping at this stage of the season, we're talking about a college basketball season that's 4 months long, 5 months long for the people who get to the finish line there the first Monday in April, play a lot of games. Everybody plays at least 30 games. The final two teams play around 40 games. So early on in a handicapping college basketball season, we're going to be using our power ratings, myself included. We go to war with our power ratings. We believe our numbers are better than the line makers. And that's going to get us, if we're good, that's going to get us to about the start of conference play, maybe early into conference play. And then that's going to wear off a little bit. And the reason it's going to wear off is everybody at that point pretty much has the same numbers. We've got 15, 20 data points, and everybody, whether it's a guy named Sonny Moore or Ken Palm or whomever, we have the same power ratings. So then we have to shift, I think, to more situational handicapping techniques. The number is always going to merit the utmost attention, but the later we get in the season, I believe that we equally need to consider rather the situation. So I can go into some a little bit more here, but the college basketball season, again, a 4 or 5 month grind. Every team, playing 30 to 40 games, and you're talking about the actors in this play. These are young men who are between the ages of 18 and 24 years old. So their effort, their focus, their determination, and even their physical health, perhaps most importantly, is not going to be the same day in and day out. There are going to be ups and downs and peaks and valleys, low points and high points. So as we're approaching what I'll call the regular season's downhill stretch, what I decided to do was examine the Associated Press's top 25 teams as of Monday, January 29th, and look at those teams. How have they performed as a home favorite? So I got 27, a sample size of 27 games that fit this trend that I'm about to give you. But, the teams, in most cases, these ranked teams, top 25, they're going to be more than a small favorite in most of these games. In some cases, in about half the games, they're probably going to be a double-digit favorite because they're one of the better teams in college basketball. And what's critical here, I think, for handicappers is to understand that the ranked team they can still get that all important W, but not cover the number. And
Right.
in some cases, you're getting a pretty good amount of points. So I took the top 25, started on Monday, January 29th, and found that ranked home favorites in the Associated Press's top 25 since Monday 29th through last night's results, last night being Wednesday, February 7th, they are only 8, 18, and 1 against the spread when a home favorite of 4 or more points. So when these ranked teams, top 25, are playing at home, favored by 4 or more, only 8, 18, and 1 against the spread. A small sample size, relatively speaking, but I still think, that it's a tool that we should have in our handicapping toolbox.
You know what? We're talking about emotion in college basketball, and that's why we're so situationally driven. We look at the court, the court rush fade, the court storm fade. Emotion. You left some emotion on the court for the next game. Even when they didn't exactly storm the court, but that was an emotional win for North Carolina against Duke. That was a charged up building. Well, guess what? They lost the game in the first 8 minutes against Clemson. They fell behind by 15 points, and that was it. They had too big of a hole to overcome. And you're talking about 4 or more. So these are teams that they're ranked ahead of. They're usually unranked teams when you're talking about a spread of that much. And how interested and how hyped up are they for this inferior opponent to come in when they've had sort of these emotional games in circle spots? And they look at the schedule. They know who's coming up and who's not and things like that. And so we're doing a lot more for college football because it's so easy and they have fewer games. And they know when there's a little lull in that schedule. So I think that's what you're hitting on here, Paul, is the favorite, the teams that's expected to win. They make up things. I mean, the best of to fabricate things. Michael Jordan to try and get them disrespected and things like that. But, when you're dealing with college-level athletes, the emotional swings are greater. They're not pros. And I think that's what you look at. You're finding that little lull here. 8, 18, and 1 as home chalk, 4 points more. In the rankings. Isn't it amazing that the rankings still carry a little bit of public bait to them when they have that number set up for them? So whether it's on pregame shows and things like that. Paul, any of these that you see coming up on the horizon here, in the near future, Saturday's big card?
Yeah, this Saturday, being Saturday, February 10th, Jimmy, I looked at the card and I found 8. There might be more. I did it, fairly quickly this morning, but tried to do my homework, and I found 8 of the Associated Press top 25 teams that are possibly going to fit this standard of being a home favorite of 4 or more points. Found 8 of those games, and just quickly going over them here real quick. St. John's at Marquette -7. Indiana at Purdue minus 18.5 projected line. BC at Duke minus 13.5. TCU at Iowa State minus 7.5. UCF at Texas Tech minus 6.5. Kansas State at BYU minus 11. UNLV at New Mexico minus 12.5. And Boise at Utah State minus 4. And the last of those games, Boise going to Utah State, going to Ogden there. This game, Utah State could be favored by a little bit less. But if they're favored by 4, I really like Boise in this situation. And I like it because there's some supporting situations and data, I believe, that support the Broncos here. And one of those being, first of all, that they've already not only covered at a pair of conference toughies, that being Nevada and New Mexico, they won at both of those places. And as you know, the Pit, one of the tougher there in Albuquerque, one of the tougher venues in all of college basketball. On top of that, Boise lost in overtime just 2 weeks ago to this same Utah State team at home. Boise was a 2.5-point home favorite in that game. Utah State had to score at the buzzer to force overtime. They win that game over Boise in Boise, so you've got that factor. And additionally, Boise's off a 75-62 loss in Fort Collins to Colorado State. So they're going to pull out all the stops. They don't want to have back-to-back losses in this tough Mountain West. This is kind of a side note, but the Mountain West, what a fun conference this year to watch. Might have 6 teams in the tournament. Looked at KenPom this morning. Top 55 schools in KenPom. Mountain West has 6 teams. The Atlantic Coast Conference has 3 teams in the top 55. And the Mountain West only is 11-team league. ACC has 15 for basketball. So really interesting. So I would like Boise +4 or more at Utah State. And also I would look at St. John's +7 at Marquette. Marquette defeated St. John's 73-72 at Madison Square Garden. Marquette was actually getting 2 points in that game back on January 20th. But now Shaka Smart's team, they got to go to, or they've got to play a St. John's team there at home. And this is a St. John's team that has played well on the road. They hadn't won all these games, but they performed admirably this year at UConn, Creighton, Villanova, and West Virginia. So they played well in some tough environments. So I would like, as far as this trend, Boise +4 more over Utah State, and St. John's, say, +7 or more at Marquette.
So getting to the Utah State game and talking about Utah State specifically, that their result this week caught my attention because they're on top. And I like you talk about the Mountain West is going to get a handful or so of teams into the tournament this year. Most bracketologists right now have them with 5 getting in to the field of 68 right now. But Paul, they're atop of the Mountain West Conference standings, and Nevada has been, kind of down like 8th or 9th. They went in there and beat them in Logan by, I think it was double digits. It was close to it, if not, but handily in that spot. So you think that Utah State is fading a little bit, or maybe not quite as strong as maybe, the top team in the Mountain West Conference?
Yeah, I think we see teams year in and year out, Jimmy, that kind of hit their peak maybe early in the year. And they played, and this was way back. This was Thanksgiving week. But they went to the Grand Cayman Islands, and they shot the 3 really well. But they beat a pretty good Stephen F. Austin team by, I think, about 30 points. And they were really, their first 6 or 8 games out of the gate, Utah State was really rolling. And even though, again, they're atop of that league, I think they are. Again, every team exhales at some point. They might get that second win later in the year as we get closer to conference tournament time and the NCAA tournament as well. But that's just a tough league, man. There's no, other than Air Force, San Jose State, Wyoming off the top of my head, there's no really easy outs in that league. So Boise, a team that's played well again on the road, and is a team that is one of those, I think 5 is the right number, one of these 6 teams is going to fall off and lose some games down the stretch. But Boise, very well a team that could be in the NCAA tournament, and I think they could play Utah State close on Saturday.
Yeah, it's a tough league. There's no doubt about that. Don't forget the big game this weekend. BetRivers is offering a second chance bet on your first same-game parlay on the big game. Place a qualifying same-game parlay on the big game. If your bet loses, you get a bonus bet equal to your wager. With your same-game parlay bet, you also earn a square that can be worth as much as $10,000. See the BetRivers app for full details and bet on the big game at BetRivers. So, trends, Paul. Are you jump on a train trend? Of course, you like to get, like stocks, you want to get it before it becomes too public. And the lines, when teams get on streaks, those lines become public and inflated. And do you get value, or do you buck a hot team? So one of the trends that I just cannot push aside, and I'll get a tip this to my colleague, my radio co-host, Charles Hannegriff, because he's been betting the Kentucky Wildcats blind to the over until further notice. They're 17-5 to the over overall. They're 8-2 in conference play to the over. Now, one of those, granted, was at Florida, where they scored like 20 points in the last minute. Florida kept fouling the threes, and those count too. But just want to qualify that one. That was, most of them are not even close. Yeah, they're going way over. Here's the statistics. Kentucky, we've seen them play. They're highly skilled, way more skilled than a typical Calipari team. But they do not have the toughness and grit on the defensive end. They just don't defend. And that's unusual for a Kentucky team. There were how many? 360 Division I teams, Paul? Is it 361, 363? I forget exactly how many. Points a game. Kentucky is number 1 in the country. 3-point percentage in the country, number 1. Assist to turnover ratio, they're 3rd in the country out of 360 teams now. Field goals made, number 1. Field goals attempted, number 2 out of 360. I'm being redundant, but I'm trying to make my point. And field goal percentage overall is 18th, the top 20. This is unbelievable pace. This is unbelievable accuracy, or, you know what I mean? And they don't want to play a whole lot of defense. And you know the public already likes the overs, okay? We know they like Kentucky. And so this is not – I'm not scooping anybody and saying Kentucky's an over team. But damn it, 17-5, Paul, and they're still going over. They're not even close. That Vandy game was 30 points to the over. So your thoughts on, in general, and in this specific trend as well. By the way, Kentucky hosts Gonzaga, an unusual non-conference spot this Saturday at Rupp.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you can't ignore, even if it's just kind of a basic trend like this, you certainly can't ignore it. A trend only ends once. Your buddy, you said it sounded like he's been on this for a while, so that's the best place to be. And you compare it to the stock market, and that's the comparison that we should oftentimes use when we consider these types of streaks. The timing of our entry into the marketplace, and at this point, if you hadn't been playing it, I wouldn't go all in, but at the same time, you might play it until it ends. It's only going to end one time. But you mentioned, with Kentucky, first of all, I'll say totals, overs and unders, they're not going to get as much volume bet into that market, obviously, as the sides.
Right.
So they might be a little bit slower to adjust.
Okay.
So there's a little bit more value, perhaps, all things considered, from a bettor's perspective. And, you mentioned it. Kentucky, highly skilled offensively at all five positions. They don't play defense. They play with incredible pace and shoot a lot of field goals, period, and shoot a lot of three-pointers, period. So that's just a great recipe for an over. And I certainly can't. Sometimes, you just you look at the basics. You don't have to dig too deep, and you just say, "Hey, man, this looks good." And if you hadn't entered the market yet on that, maybe jump in and wade in and dip your toes in the water and see what happens.
And one of the unders in conference play with South Carolina, and they just slow it down. They're the Army-Navy of college football with totals, because they love putting those games in the mud. So interesting, man. It's 17-5 overall, 8-2 in SEC play to the over, and that is unbelievable numbers. First and second in so many out of so many teams. Very, very interesting. We do it every week. Paul Stone and I, again, breaking, kind of trading college basketball handicapping approaches and some games that apply coming up. All right, and also we did mention, buying a half a point. It certainly did not hit this past from Saturday to Wednesday like it did the previous week, but it still paid for itself. 2 out of 36 major conference teams, 1.5 to 6.5 point spreads. You buy it to the whole number. Again, every one takes 1 out of 22 to hit on that number and save yourself a loss. Put it up time. So still ahead of pace and paying for more than itself. So we'd like to go back and look at some of the things that we've talked in previous podcasts. For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott here in the Sports Bettor's Paradise on the BetRivers Network.